Okay, this is the review video for topic 0.4, the development and the use of new ethical systems and monotheistic religions. Okay, so this is a topic that we covered over 2 days. And the very first thing that you need to do is you need to make sure to go back to its learning and read and be able to answer the guided question on the reading the four great revolutions in thought and religion. There will be some other activities that I ask you to make sure to get done from its learning or to at least have for your review. But this is going to give you the information that we covered in class. So when we look at this topic, our learning target is basically worded like an essay prompt. So, what we're doing is we're creating an argument that does two things. One, we want to explain why new monotheistic religions and ethical systems emerged between 500 and 1000 BCE. And we also need to take a look at how these new systems influence the governments, the economic systems, and the social structures of empire. This would be the main thing. The reason why this is important is because these new ethical systems and monotheistic religions are going to be very important to empires. And we're about to get into an extensive study of empires, and so we're going to need to know not only what system they used, but how did it influence their government, their economic system, and their social structure. So we begin with a little brain teaser. What do you think? Are people born good and made bad by society, or born bad and made good by society? Another way to explain this would be, are people inherently good, think reasonably, or are people driven by their selfish, their brutish ways? See, this question is the foundation question before we create any type of religion or any type of political system. Because in both, we're dealing with the behavior of people. And the core reason why those people behave is going to dictate the decisions that we make when we make laws and policies. So if we feel people are born good and made bad by society, we're going to focus on creating a society that is very good. We're going to educate people. If we're saying that people are born bad and driven by their selfish urges, and this causes them to act very brutishly, we're going to make them good through a very strict society. So, today in the United States, with our democracy, we pursue an idea that people are rational, they're born good. And if we educate them, okay, we can make sure that the society's good and therefore all people will be good. Now, in the past, we've had situations where people were considered to be not necessarily evil, but selfish, brutish, basically doing what they want to do to survive. So the laws are going to be strict. Now, this is not going to be any type of essay or test question, but the bottom line is this decision is going to be basically key in understanding why people chose particular systems to kind of base their governments on. So to contextualize what's going on, to put this into the big picture, right about the time when the civilizations were beginning to transition to empires, we have what's known as the Axle Age. And the Axle Age was essentially a period of very revolutionary thinking. Human beings began to really look at themselves and tried to explain why they did the things that they did. So they're going to come up with new ideas to address human nature, meaning that they're going to be answering the question about basically how are humans made? Are they made good and rational? And so we're going to focus on teaching them to make better decisions. Or are they driven by selfish urges? So we're going to have to make decisions based on force. The bottom line was during this time is that these new ideas to address human nature focused on the rationalism. Now, this only happened in Eurasia, but these ideas are going to spread and become the monotheistic religions and the ethical systems that we're going to see throughout the rest of history. In another way, the actual age is the context or the setting for the rise of monotheistic religions and ethical systems because people looked at humans as rational beings who could be trained to make better decisions. And so during this time period, pretty much every one of the religions and ethical systems that we use today essentially was created. So, this is a blown up picture from the reading, The Four Great Revolutions in Thought and Religion. And the guiding question that I asked you to answer while you read this was why did new religions and ethical systems emerge? So, here's our evidence, not necessarily why, but evidence that it happened. Prior to the Axle Age, known as the Bronze Age, everybody was polytheistic, worshiping many gods that either had human qualities or were still animistic. Now, at the very beginning of the Axle Age, we see the development of what we call ethnic religions, which essentially featured Judaism and Hinduism, two of the first monotheistic religions. Now, I know that you're sitting there saying, wait a minute, Hinduism has many gods. How can be it monotheistic? Well, for the sake of this class, I want you to consider all 180 gods in Hinduism as not individual gods, but different roles, different attitudes, different jobs of the main god, Brahman, the god of the Hindus. Judaism was also emerged from Zoroastrianism, but also focused on monotheism. Now, these two religions, being ethnic, meaning that they focused on an ethnic group, essentially began to teach people how to behave. Now, we also continue to see ancestor worship and Greco-Roman mythology. In phase two, which happens about the middle of this, we see the rise of what's known as universal religions. A universal religion is essentially a religion that has ideas that cross cultures. So both Christianity, which emerged from Judaism, and Buddhism, which emerged from Hinduism, essentially had basic ideas on how people were supposed to behave, and they spread because of their equality. Also, when we talk about ethical systems, we have Confucianism and Taoism, and another one called legalism, which was not in the chapter, but is all it is just strict laws. And then we have the rise of Greco-Roman philosophy. Further development saw the development of the religion of Islam and different forms of Buddhism. Now, the bottom line here is this. The bottom line is that during the Axle Age, every religion that we've come to see today and every ethical system basically emerged from this time period. The other thing is, I want you to look at the line of development. We have the Judeo-Christian line, where Judaism evolved into Christianity, evolved into Islam. You have the Hindu line. The Hinduism developed into Buddhism, developed into Mahayana and Zen Buddhism. And then we have the development of ethical systems. All of these focus on teaching people how to behave. So when we kind of define what these two things are, ethical monotheism is belief in a superhuman power, one God, that establish universal ideas about the ways human beings should behave. So when we look at any monotheistic religions, say Buddhism or Islam, there is a code of conduct. Buddhism having the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, and Islam having not only the five pillars, but also the Sharia law. This is also seen in Christianity in the Ten Commandments. So, this belief in one God essentially focuses on teaching behavior. An ethical system is simply a system of morals and ideas that guide human behavior. These teach that the key to a good life is through correct behavior. And they develop in areas where really the polytheistic religions were too strong. That's why they emerged both in Greece and in China. So these are the two things that we're really working with in these lessons. But we still haven't really explained why. So hopefully you've read the article, The Four Great Religious Revolutions in Thought and Religion. If you haven't, press pause and go ahead and read it. Okay, this first part of our essential question essentially focuses on the why. So this is causation. And as the article that you read said, basically they developed in advanced areas, the four river valley civilization. They were caused by the crisis caused by iron weapons and the Indo-European invasions. It also argued that there have been not any new religions since then, and I'll explain that in a minute. They spread across trade routes and they evolve, and they focus on the simple life and answering those questions in a simple way. But these five things are not causes in themselves. It's just a list of things that occurred that really don't explain why humans abandoned their polytheism and went to monotheism. When we kind of think about it and sit down and kind of structure a causation change, we begin with number one, intelligence. In the four river valley civilizations, humans had developed their knowledge and become smarter. And eventually, their knowledge focused on trying to explain human behavior and trying to find a way to convince people to behave, which is a foundation of monotheistic religions. So this greater intelligence in the four river valley civilizations is going to point humanity toward developing an ethical monotheistic religion or an ethical system. Now, this situation was made worse by a period of crisis. Okay, the invention of iron and the use of it to make weapons ended the force that a polytheistic religion could use to make people behave, meaning that iron was so abundant and iron weapons basically everybody had. The situation that we saw is that the old polytheistic religions, they didn't work anymore because they're forced religions. So, in one respect, if I were an early priest living in one of the river valley civilizations and you were someone who I wanted to make behave. I could walk up, be very mean to you, tell you to behave and things like that. But you had those iron weapons. And basically, if I tried to harm you physically, you could fight back and protect yourself. See, those old polytheistic religions weren't making sense. And literally, people came to realize, hey, wait a minute. There's not a God of the sun or, a head God that has human-like qualities. So this crisis is really telling people that, hey, these polytheistic religions, they're not truthful. They don't work. It's time to come up with something else. So far, just to sum up what we've talked about is number one, okay, people got smarter. They began to focus on human behavior and they began to realize that the polytheistic religions were wrong. And then the crisis that occurred made them develop new ideas. Because let's face it, nobody wants to live in crisis. Now, the third cause and the trigger cause would be the simplicity. These ideas that came up, that were developed, and eventually formed the basis of these ethical systems and these monotheistic religions were very simple. They only focused on human behavior, not sacrifice, not, trying to explain why a rock fell and hit your head. And they were very easy to learn and they appealed to people. So to kind of sum up the why here, people got smarter. They were forced to because of the crisis. And these became so popular because they were simple, correcting the problems that people faced, and they were very easy to learn. So we've pretty much hit that first part. When we explain why new monotheistic religions and ethical systems emerged, it was because of the growing intelligence of humans, the crisis, which basically made them develop new ideas, and the simplicity that really appealed to people that allowed for their spread. So, this is the end of part one. Okay. Now you can move to part two to hear the answer to the second part of the question.